Untitled Chapter. So I am going to talk a bit about things that I would do different for my next birth slash things. Ooh, Kemi's obviously here. Slash things that he has the hiccups, by the way. Things that I maybe didn't like as much about my birth and pregnancy, sort of prenatal care and labor and delivery. I think I've documented my choices and everything. I went the very non-traditional, bless you, route of doing an unmedicated home birth, water birth with midwives for my first birth. And I have several videos talking about all of that I highly recommend for you to watch. And overall, I had an incredible birth. I have my birth story posted as well, and I'm very happy with everything. But reflecting some more, time has passed. It's been 6 months now since I gave birth, and I've had more time to reflect and to learn more information, which I didn't think possible given how much I learned and prepared for my birth. But I did learn a lot more, and that has made me look at some things in a different light. So because I've been so transparent about this whole journey, I wanted to share some things I would do differently, or some things that I maybe did not like. Well, if I have another baby, I actually would like to do what's called a wild pregnancy and a free birth, which means that there is no OB and there's no midwife, and you are just doing it without any sort of like standardized institutional, without how should I say it, outside of those institutions. So you, throughout your pregnancy, the wild pregnancy, you are not tracking anything. You are not listening to the heartbeat. I guess you could if you wanted to on your own, but you're not going to any professional. You're just letting your body do what it does. And a free birth is essentially what it is, free birth. So you are just, again, when the time comes and you give birth, you just give birth sort of on your own. I guess a disclaimer here is that is something that involves an insane amount of preparation, at least the way that I would do it. And I'm definitely looking forward to taking Janae's course on wild pregnancy free birth. I trust every word she says. And if anyone's interested in that, comment below and I'll give you the information for the course. But yeah, so that is sort of definitely the direction in which I moved in, after, which I think is really interesting, because so many people said that, oh my God, you're doing a home birth, you have a midwife, not a doctor, for your first time birth, you're gonna have you're gonna hit labor and like beg to go to the hospital, your next births are all gonna be with a doctor in a hospital. And it's like, that is so not the case for anyone who does a home birth. Like, you are for sure going to do another home birth, or you move even further in the direction of like wild pregnancy free birth, which is the direction in which I've moved in. And I'm definitely going to be talking more about wild pregnancy and free birth in another video, but that's not what the purpose of this video is. So the first thing that I would want to do differently, that looking back at I'm not as pleased with, is, so throughout my prenatal care, since I had midwives, I would go see them once a month, and we already did very, very limited testing. So if you've ever been pregnant and you've done it within the medical model and the hospital model does a lot of testing on pregnant women. The midwife model does very, very, very limited testing, but it still does some testing. And so for my next birth, I would definitely skip all of that. I don't want a single test throughout my entire pregnancy. And the testing that I had is, I had one ultrasound, the 20-week ultrasound anatomy scan. Don't need that. There's no need for it. Plus, there are risks that come with getting an ultrasound that just are not worth it to me. So definitely there was no need. I wasn't even finding out the sex of the baby, so absolutely no need for that. Would skip that ultrasound easy. And then the other things that I had is already skipped all of the genetic testing which they do, which honestly is just, I don't know why would anyone do that. I mean, if it shows that the baby has some type of genetic disease or problem, would that mean that by this point, when I'm like 6-7 months pregnant, I wouldn't be having the baby anymore? Like, what would that change? I don't really understand. Definitely. I mean, I didn't do those tests and I wouldn't do them. The only test really that I did, apart from that ultrasound, was the glucose test. If you're familiar with it, it's when you have to drink this extremely toxic and unhealthy sugary liquid, concentrated sugar basically, and to test for gestational diabetes. That test is what gave me the most headache in my entire prenatal care that I received. I failed it twice. And so I drank that awful liquid twice. I caused so much stress on my body doing that. And because I failed it twice, I had to do the other thing, which is pricking your finger for 2 weeks, 3 times or 5 times a day, and logging everything you eat and logging the results, basically. That I've done a lot more research. I know that that test is completely unnecessary. I'm not going to be going into the details here in the science, but I'm happy to share resources. Most importantly to note is that even though the US now tests every single woman for gestational diabetes, or every single pregnant person, and even though we're, getting all this data that we didn't used to have before, it has not actually improved birthing outcomes in any way. And really, this is something I kept asking my midwives, like, okay, I'm failing it, what am I supposed to do? The only solution that they really tell you is to eat healthier. And the reason I am particularly mad about having done that test, because first of all, it caused stress to my body to ingest that awful drink that you have to do, and I did it twice on my pregnant body. And secondly, because of the mental stress that it caused for me to fail those tests. And that is something, again, what is prenatal care? Is it something that causes you stress? And why would you put yourself through that when there's really no benefit in doing that? And then that was really like a point of sort of conflict I had with my midwives when they suggested that, well, if I don't want to take the test, I can just do the finger pricking thing, which is very non-invasive, like just a couple of pricks a day that you test your blood. But that wasn't the issue. I tried to tell them that for me as a person with a history of eating disorders, to log everything I eat for 2 weeks and to test my blood sugar levels after each meal is going to cause me incredible stress. And that is just not something that I want to put myself through. And that is where it really is one of the reasons why hospital care and the hospital model is so bad, is because the care is standardized. So you use the same standard model for every single person, even though we're all individual with different needs and abilities and skills and different care needs, basically. And that was an instance in which, unfortunately, the midwives sort of had to, because there's a lot of things that they also have to do according to the law, which is why I also want to go up to the free birth, wild pregnancy free birth model. It's just not something I should have put myself through. That caused me stress. That was not prenatal care. That was just prenatal trauma, really. It was unnecessary. And what's also funny is that after I did do the pricking thing and tested myself for those 2 weeks, all of my results were within norm. So how did I fail that test? That test is the glucose sugar test, is actually like notorious, like it's known for being extremely inaccurate. So again, what's the need? So as far as testing, that's really all that I did, but I wanted to also say a note about testing in general, like why is it bad? For one, as I said, we over-test people so much, and this is in the medical model. And this is not just true for pregnancy and birth in general, and even doctors will admit this. We over-test people to the point where the testing itself harms the person more than whatever is that we are testing for, type of thing. And that is one aspect of it. But the other thing is that medical model when it comes to pregnancy, and oftentimes also midwife care that has to adhere to certain legal standards that it has been pushed into, a lot of the times takes the agency away from the birthing person and dismisses the birthing person's own inner intelligence and bodily intelligence, which should be the primary source that everything else follows. And testing is just one way that it's done. Every single time you get a test and you're waiting for a result is sort of giving a bit of your agency away and saying, I don't really know what's good with my body. I don't really know what's good with this baby, or what needs to happen, or what is okay and what's not okay. This person in a lab coat is going to tell me, or this, these results are going to let me know if I have a genetically fine or not baby. These results are going to let me know if I'm eating well or not. When, again, those things are not needed, and they make you lose trust in yourself. I don't know if I'm really making myself clear in this, but they make you lose trust in yourself. And this is particularly true if you read a lot of birthing books about hospital birth in general and what happens when you birth in a hospital. A lot of the process just takes agency away from you, first of all, and it takes away your confidence. It demolishes your confidence in yourself and in your body, and that directly steeps into your confidence that you have as a parent. If after you give birth, like seconds after you give birth, your baby's taken away from you and there's nurses and doctors doing this and this and that, and you don't even see your baby for the first hour, and they're doing all sorts of tests on the baby, what that signals, and even if you don't really consciously acknowledge or understand that, subconsciously what happens is that you come to think that there's all these other people who know better about my baby and what my baby needs, and they know how to do those things that I don't know how to do, and my baby wouldn't survive unless those things were being done to him, and I don't know those things, so I can't rely on my inner intelligence as a mother always. I need to rely on these other people. And that transition happens, throughout pregnancy, and how your pregnancy is treated, to then how your birth happens, to then how confident you feel as a mom. Kimmy is really kind of fussy right now, so it's hard to focus myself and explain this well, so I'm sorry if I'm not doing it right. I'm willing to talk more about testing in general, maybe make a video just about that, because even tests that are technically harmless to your body aren't always harmless to you, in a much deeper way than just the needle that you get, the blood drawn that you get, and stuff like that. So anyways, definitely no testing. The other thing is, okay, so this is what we've moved on to, because Kimmy's a little fussy right now. But yeah, what I was talking about prenatal care, and I'm happy to share resources because there are people who know about this a lot more, women from whom I've learned about all of this stuff, who can put it into words much better. But I remember reading this one Instagram caption talking about what is prenatal care, and is prenatal care going to sit in someone's cold office and feeling like you're always being tested and then being tested, and kind of feeling this like fear and anxiety around these visits? Or is prenatal care being around sisters, being around other women, being in women's circles, eating well, resting, having the space to dream and manifest and think about this life that you're bringing into on earth? Like, what is prenatal care really? And I know what it is for me, and it's not the medical model, but it's also not the midwife model of limited testing. I don't really think I need to sacrifice any of what I want. I don't need to do a single test if I don't want to. So yeah. Other thing about prenatal care that I would have done different is, well, I didn't come to this, but again, in the midwife model, and it depends on, of course, who your midwife is, the state you live in, and so on, but you cannot birth at home. I couldn't have birthed at home if I had gone past 42 weeks. At that point, you have to give birth in a hospital. So sort of the 41st week, you are encouraged, if you want to birth at home, if that is important to you, to sort of naturally induce. And FYI, there is no such thing as naturally inducing labor. Labor comes when it comes, and even if you're using Blue Cahoose or whatever, Just because something comes from nature does not make the process natural. It's not natural induction, it is induction. So future, I would absolutely go past 42 weeks if that happened. I have no problems doing that. I know many women who've birthed past 42 weeks and everything is fine. It's one of those, again, standard models, just a number that is put on us that has nothing to do with us. So for me, it didn't come to that because I gave birth in 41 weeks. But I remember on the 41st week, I was under a lot of stress because I knew how important home birth was to me, and I knew that how important not being induced was to me. But I knew that I was running against the clock and I shouldn't have felt that way. I also was genuinely very seriously considering letting Bela, my midwife, do a membrane sweep to start labor if it came down to like the last possible day. And I'm sick. I'm sick to even hear myself say that and to think that I could have potentially and would have done a membrane sweep, because that's not something that I wanted to do. It's again part of the model, the system that was pushing me to do that, because otherwise I couldn't birth at home. Again, hence why I'm moving the free birth route, or at least, I mean, if I had the type of midwife care where that is not an issue, although for most it is. You typically have to, because of like legal reasons, have to give birth at a hospital if you go past that point. Then for birth itself, I basically did have a free birth. My midwives got here about an hour before I birthed Kemi. So really I did all of that, laboring part, everything completely on my own. Even birth itself, I was in the pool and they stayed on the sidelines and I did the thing myself. So I really did have a free birth. The only things that I would change is one, I would not time contractions ever. So at some point in the middle of the night when I was in labor, Isaiah downloaded the app and timed contractions, and I talk about this in my birth story, but that was an unpleasant experience. I was going through really fucking hard contractions, and it took all my mental energy to just breathe through them and to stay in this trust and allow and relax cycle, and to not slip into the fear, pain, tension cycle. And having to tell someone, oh, my contraction's starting now, and oh, it's going down now, oh, it's over now, was insanely hard and invasive and unnecessary, most of all. So definitely no timing contractions, especially because I knew I knew everything. Like, I did not need to have some arbitrary, oh, they're 3 minutes apart, they're 5 minutes apart. I knew at any point how dilated I was, basically. I knew when I got to 10 centimeters is when I told Isaiah, get the midwives here, I'm at 10 centimeters, I'm ready to push. I knew all those things. So there was really no need for tracking anything. Like, it's just unnecessary. The other thing is that during my labor, when I was in the pool already in the pushing stage, like the last hour when the midwife was here, Bela was at some point using the fetal monitor, just like putting it on my belly, listening to the baby's heartbeat, listening to, I think, the baby's heartbeat, yeah. And I mean, she did do it in a very least invasive way that she possibly could, like she would just like kind of stick her hand in the pool and like try to get it and then back off, and she did that just a few times. So it really wasn't anything awful. I wasn't like hooked onto things in a bed, in a hospital bed, as I would be in a hospital. But even that was unnecessary, and I didn't want that and would not consent to that next time. The very last thing, which again, luckily is something I didn't do, but I was this close to doing it, so I'm mentioning it here. But after giving birth, I did tear. I had a small tear at the top and a small tear at the bottom, and my midwives wanted to give me stitches. And luckily for me, the pain down there, like being touched down there after giving birth, hurt so much that as much as I wanted to give in and say, yeah, stitch me up, I simply couldn't. Like I told them, I was like, like you touching me down there right now just to look at the tear hurt more than pushing this thing out of me. I just cannot, like, it just hurt too much. So because of that, I said I denied the stitches, and for a long time after, I felt really bad about it and scared. I was like, oh, I don't know. I mean, my body intelligence was telling me that I made the right decision, but I wasn't sure. I was like, maybe I should have done it, you know, what if I fucked up? Like, what if I should have gotten the stitches? And then later, of course, I learned that my body intelligence was correct, and that in fact, we heal better in most cases, in most minor tears, without stitches. Just the important thing is that you need to rest and not get out of bed during the healing period, which most women are unable to do due to capitalism, domestic labor duties, and so on and so on. But I did stay in bed and I did rest and I healed perfectly and everything was fine. But that's something that at the moment I really would have done it if it hadn't hurt so much, and then I would have regretted it. So definitely another thing that I would not want to get next time. Very last thing to note here is that I've heard before when I was, you know, deciding to do a home birth, typically women have their first birth at a hospital, and then that experience is why they choose to do a home birth for the second time. Or, you know, like a lot of first-time moms maybe want to have a home birth already the first time, but they're still too afraid and unsure, as we obviously are because we have never been through birth. So they choose to do a hospital birth first and then do a home birth. And that makes sense, and I understand that. Like, I relate to that fully. And, you know, there were times when I was scared and I had to do a lot of fear clearing to do a home birth as a first-time mom. But I saw this thing once that said, your first birth is not a trial run. And that just spoke to me so much, because it really felt like, you know, it feels like a lot of times when women choose to do something they don't really want as much, so you settle for a hospital birth just because it is your first birth and you're still too unsure and you think, okay, next one, maybe I'll do home. Birth is not a trial run. Birth is something like, is by far the biggest, most transformative experience I've ever had. It's by far the hardest thing I've ever done. It's also something that can deeply, deeply traumatize you for a long, long time, as it does a lot of women daily, every day. A lot of birthing people are traumatized during birth, especially in the hospital setting. And that really spoke to me, where I realized that this is not a trial run. I don't need to sacrifice anything just because it's the first time and I don't really know what it's like. And that's sort of how I feel now, thinking about doing a wild pregnancy and free birth, where I don't think I need to, you know, birth 2 or 3 more kids to then be like, okay, now with my 4th one, I'm confident enough to birth on my own. Like, no, I'm confident. I know what I was made for. But yeah, anyway, so those are just a few things I wanted to share. Because I've been so transparent, as I said, with this journey, I wanted to share also things that maybe I didn't like or I would change for next time, if that can help someone who's in this process right now. But Kemi is fussy and needs mommy's 110% of mommy's attention that you have not been getting. So I'm going to go do that right now. Love you all and have a beautiful day.